At my uncle's home in Colorado, as you pull into his driveway with the beautiful mountains in the background, he has a sign that hangs on his fence that says, "Welcome to my point of view." I began this morning this way because I always have appreciated speakers who lay their cards on the table and up front come and tell the people that they're speaking to the perspective from which they're speaking. So if you will indulge me just for a moment, I'm married to Susan, 20 years, 4 children, Indiana farm boy. I have been a pastor for 15 years, a chaplain for 10. I am a U.S. Navy chaplain, currently assigned to the Coast Guard. Navy chaplains serve with Marines, serve with the Navy, and also serve with the Coast Guard. I also have served with MSC, so civilian mariners that are assigned to DOD. I've been on a ship of 1,200 people in Guam, many port calls in that area of the world, ridden fast attack submarines in that part of the world, and deployed to combat in Iraq with the United States Marine Infantry Battalion. So that is the perspective in which I talk about our topic this morning. And as I begin, I wanted to draw your attention to a passage in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. And as God creates everything, He says that it's good, except for when He creates Adam. Everything's good in all of creation except He creates Adam, and it's not tov. It's not good, right? Because there is a problem. Maybe it's a problem of reproduction. That's a physical problem. But today we're talking about a social isolation problem, and that is also a problem. He doesn't have a companion. It's not compatible. And it is only after God creates Eve that He says it's good. I begin that way this morning because as I think about it, chaplains are all about building that community, reminding people that we are not isolated. And when we think that we are, we have a real issue and problem. Sometimes people that are on ships and go out to sea, even on the ship in a crowd, can feel isolated. And so this morning, if you will indulge me, I'm not an expert. I consider myself a journeyman. When I think about like an expert in the area of marriage, I think about my mom and dad who are at 55 years, right? I'm only at 20. I might learn something in 35 years, all right? I've only been a dad for a little bit. My mom and dad have been parents for 50 years. I'm addressing a lot of people in this room that have a lot more experience and knowledge than me. So what I thought I would do is to share what I do in real life, because a lot of times chaplains, at least where I work now, I travel 6 states from New Jersey to North Carolina. I have 3,000 personnel, and I have 2 chaplains that work with me. We're not going to go out on all the Coast Guard cutters all the time with that amount of people. We make visits. We, a lot of times, go where there's a problem or an issue and try to help put it out. We're called upon when there's that problem. We go, we try to help. But we try to be proactive as well. And one of the things that we do is to try to go and be proactive is build the relationships. And so just yesterday, I went to a cutter for the very first time, and I talked with the crew. So if I can pretend this morning that you're the crew and I am the chaplain and I'm walking aboard and I'm addressing you, I'm going to talk to you a little bit how I would get at this social isolation using the term that we use now in DOD and the Department of Homeland Security that's really big right now, but it really gets to what we're talking about this morning. That term is resiliency. Resiliency. Okay? So if I could have a little bit of participation with you this morning, I would like to ask you a question. Remember, you're the crew. All right? If I can defeat you physically, can I defeat you? How many say, Absolutely not, Chaplain. There's absolutely no way that you can defeat me. Raise your hand. Let's see it. Come on. There we go. Absolutely not. Okay? All right. How many say yes? All right, just keep your hands down if you're not participating this morning. So in high school, I wrestled against a guy who was a state champion in Indiana. I was not the state champion in Indiana. I only wrestled 1 year. My senior year is because I didn't want to play basketball, so I wrestled. I had not had really any other training, and I wrestled against the state champion in practice. All right, we're on the same team, but in practice, 152, right? He's the state champion, I'm not. We wrestled. Who won? My back was on the mat. His hand was raised every single time. I tried to get stronger and faster. What happened? He got stronger and faster. He always beat me every single time. Was his hand raised in victory? Okay. Well, those of you that said, there's absolutely no way, Chaplain, that we can be physically defeated, perhaps you're already going to areas that I don't want to go to yet. Maybe you're already bringing in the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, but I don't want to go there yet. All right? You can, in fact, be defeated physically. You as an individual and you as a group. If I was addressing the Coast Guard, I would say you as an organization. Let me just ask you this. Does the ocean take lives? Is the ocean more powerful than you as an individual and you as a group? You could put everybody in our whole entire Coast Guard and put them on a search and rescue case, and the ocean could still defeat them because we could not find a person. Correct? What are we going to call that? A problem. Okay. All right. Well, there's a movie that I really like. It's called Cool Hand Luke. Anybody seen it? Cool Hand Luke is in a fight with a bigger guy in prison. Now, whether or not he's wrongly in prison, we can discuss that at a later date. But it really, actually, is a really spiritual movie. You could even argue it comes from a Christian perspective. All right? But Cool Hand Luke is with this man, and they're fighting. And Cool Hand Luke's knocked down. He gets back up. He's knocked down again by this larger man. He gets back up. He's knocked down again. He gets back up. If you're honest, though, did Cool Hand Luke physically get beat up? Yes. But he says to the man, you're going to have to kill me in order to defeat me. What was Cool Hand Luke relying upon? He wasn't physically stronger than the man.
Psychological warfare.
Maybe psychological warfare. Mental at least. Emotional. Spiritual. Right? And eventually the man actually becomes his friend and disciple, if you will. All right? Okay, well, let me ask you a second question. Can I defeat you mentally? Now you're like, I don't know, Chaplain. You're kind of tricky this morning. I don't know if I want to play anymore. Can I defeat you mentally? Well, let me just ask you, or let me give you two examples. How many of you have ever seen Happy Days? All right. How many saw the Fonz in Happy Days? Okay. How many saw the Fonz fight in Happy Days? He didn't fight. Never once in all the episodes, and I watched them all. Reruns, of course. I know. That was a cheap one. He never fought once. Why? He didn't have to because it was all here, right? Well, let me ask you about the first Gulf War. First Gulf War. Saddam Hussein's supposed to have this army that is a terrifying army, like the 300, right? Fighting the Persians. Okay? After a campaign of shock and awe and dropping bombs, the U.S. military rolls across the desert, and do they fight? They didn't fight in that first Gulf War. They, in fact, handed over their weapons, hundreds of them, because how was they mentally? Going back to that wrestling, I also wrestled against a guy in high school, and he would wear one of those stocking caps all the time. And before his matches, he'd be over hitting himself, pulling down that stocking, hitting himself, pulling it down. And I stopped and I asked him one time, why do you do that? I'm kind of scared. And he said, my point exactly. If people didn't want to wrestle him, and if they were scared, did they already check out? Did he already win? Mentally, you can be defeated. You can. So what are we doing mentally to be proactive? Third, can you be defeated emotionally? How many of you have ever gone on a long trip with small children in the back seat? Let's say that small child is hungry or has to pee. How are their emotions? Better yet, how are mom and dad's emotions? How are they doing? Right? I said some things in that context that I said I would never say, that seemed to come out because I was taught by my parents and they said them. But what if that child is allowed to use the restroom? Or what if they are given something to eat? It's connected, isn't it? The physical and the emotional is connected. We had a member, and because of confidentiality, of course, I'll never share, but it's a general story, who got a call from a spouse, former spouse. There had been some abuse, and the couple was going through a divorce. There was some abuse in the past relationship, and she had thought she had moved on and he was out of her life and everything was getting better. But this particular morning, it came back. She went to work, put on her uniform, and at the end of the day drove to a bridge in the local area. Got out her phone after she drove to the bridge and started texting people. How is she doing right now mentally? She thought her future was getting better, but then the past came into the future and into the present, and now she felt a little bit defeated again, right? Who was she texting? She was actually texting her other family members, and she was saying emotional things. So how was she doing emotionally? Not very good. So mentally and emotionally, how's she doing? Would you say defeated? Okay, let's come back to that story. If I can defeat you spiritually, can I defeat you? Now you're like, I don't know. All right? I heard John Coffey speak one time. He was in the Hanoi Hilton. I believe he rose to the rank of captain. He was in there with John McCain, and they used to do the tapping on the walls. They used to tap GB, God bless, to each other. And his words, not mine, kind of paraphrased, it wasn't what was physical, mental, or emotional that sustained people, but rather physical. He said most of the people that were captured, at least where he were aviators. They were all the smartest people, mentally. At least they think they are. Right? Physically, they meet all the Navy standards, and they are pretty physically fit guys to fly those jets, right? To land on aircraft carriers. It's pretty tough stuff. Okay? Emotionally, they went through all the same experiences. Social isolation, being a prisoner of war. Why did some make it and some did not? He said it came down to the spiritual, and it came down to a 4-letter word. A good 4-letter word. Hope. 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 So we don't have a Cool Hand Luke situation on the bridge, do we? So Cool Hand Luke was physically defeated, wasn't he? How was he doing mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? Kept getting back up. Kept getting back up. Kept getting back up. Kept getting back up. How's our young woman on the bridge? Mentally defeated. Emotionally defeated. Spiritually, where's her hope? She's looking for it, maybe. But all she has to do now is jump, and all 4 will be complete, right? Now, this is what's interesting and unique is I don't know what that is for each person, because maybe you have one of the 3, maybe you have half of one of the 3, and you can still get up. I don't know what that is for each and every person, because I think that your resiliency level is different than mine. I asked then my crews this question. Why is it that to go see the chaplain is always a negative thing? So on our uniform that she's wearing in the back, we have 2 name tapes. One says our name and one says U.S. Coast Guard on it. On the U.S. Coast Guard side, on the professional side, we are very proactive. We send people to training after training after training after training after training. When I was with the Marines, we would brief just to go to chow. This is how we're going to go to chow. We're going to go chow this way, then we're going to go here, and we're going to, okay, good, perfect. All right, great, that's how we're going to go. And then once we got there, we would have a debrief about how we went. And then we would brief about how we would eat before we would eat. That's just how it is in the DOD and Department of Homeland Security. It's the way we function. But you know what? To go to school, to go to a training is a reward. You have reached this level of responsibility. They want to give you another level of responsibility, but they're going to train you. So they're being proactive. They're saying, you are really good. You're doing a good job. We want to make you better. Great. That's on the professional side. When do we do that, though, on the personal side? I mean, I've been married 20 years. If I would tell you I'm going to go to a counselor, you would think, uh-oh, there's something wrong in the marriage. That's what your first thought would be. Why is that? What if I just want to get better? Don't you think I could get better as being a husband? I think I could. Or being a dad. Because in my experience, the social isolation comes because there's personal problems that follow people out to sea. They blow all the way across wherever people are, and in the world of social media, they get there pretty quickly. But we're always reactive instead of proactive in that world. I should say, oftentimes, instead of always. Many times. So how can we be more resilient? I think chaplains, of course, engage in the physical, mental, emotional, but I think our area really is the spiritual. And just like eating that Snickers bar, right? Because you're not yourself if you're hungry, right? Give them a Snickers bar and all of a sudden their emotions are good, right? If we engage in that physical area, in that spiritual area, we can help in that physical area. We can help in that emotional area. We can help in that mental area. I do have one word of caution, though. At least this is what I've experienced. Chaplains are those caretakers who go with those aboard ships, do incarnational ministry. And that means you, too, can be socially isolated. And from my own experience, you can't give unless you receive. You first have to be given something in order to give it out. And if it's depleted in any area, you can't give it. This means you will experience the separation from family, the spectrum of emotions, the pressure, the boredom, the temptations. But you know what? I oftentimes walk away from a visit with a unit, and later they'll call me and people will come and say, "Thank you, you did something." And I'm like, "Don't even know what I did." Your presence brings credibility. And I'm oftentimes reminded it's not Matt Prince. It's who I represent, the divine. And from my faith tradition, the triune God. You know, Henry V, Shakespeare's Henry V, there's a speech when he talks about the great battle. And those that weren't there will hold their manhoods cheap when any speak who fought with us on St. Crispin's Day. Those of you that have access, those of you that were there, understand. I walk in a room and it's sailors or Marines or Coast Guardmen. They're doing two things. They're looking at how I look in uniform and they're reading my rack. This is called a rack. Because right there it tells you everything that I've done in the military. Right there they know where I've deployed, what I've done, and they're reading it right away. One, I'm already in the group, and two, they're seeing that. That credibility is instantaneous. It's given because of the great legacy of chaplains that have already served before me. And if I honor that and keep on doing my job, it'll be there for the next chaplain. And finally, presence means that as we stay strong, we help others stay strong. Chaplains in the DoD assigned to the Department of Homeland Security have two things that no one else has. I have, protected by law, absolute confidentiality. I experience the same thing that those in uniform experience, and yet I'm outside of their chain of command in the sense that I am not a mandatory reporter for anything. Anything. Not suicide, not sexual assault, not murder, not anything. Anything. It's protected by law. How do you think that that would be used by the command and then also by the individuals to help people with issues or problems? That they have a sacred place, a sacred trust between me and this person. That they can share anything knowing there are no repercussions. A safe place. Well, let's get back to our woman on the bridge, because I don't want to leave you with a sad story. So her people that she texted, her one family, called her other family, her professional family. And they happened to be in the business of saving lives. Search and rescue. In fact, they know every bridge in the area. They find out that they have a member on a bridge in the area. Don't you think we have boats that can go to every bridge in the area? Don't you think we can do this all the time? And that's exactly how they responded. U.S. Coast Guard on the scene for this member. We call the first responders. She's taken to the hospital. I'm called. Is she taken care of physically? She then talks to the doctors at the hospital. How about now? Mentally, emotionally. And I go visit. And you know what I talk to her about? It's a 4-letter word. Hope. She's doing well today. God bless. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you listening to me.